All right, good morning. So I'll start by telling you a little story. I'm embarrassed to say this was like 45 years ago. My brother had gotten his driver's license, and he really, really wanted a car. And he would just be at my dad every day about, Dad, I got to have a car. 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 Can I have a car? When can I have a car? What do I need to do to have a car? Blah, blah, blah. So finally, my father had thought about it, and he said, okay, you want a car? He said, and the car is an adult thing. So I need you to be more responsive as far as your chores around the house. Your mother tells me you're not doing the things you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do them, so that would be the first thing. Second of all, I noticed your grades are going downhill, so I want to see those go uphill. Okay? We'll take one semester. You know, it was about 10 weeks was a semester. And he said, so I want to see some improvement there. And third and lastly, now remember, this was in the age of Woodstock, okay? So my brother had really long hair. It was always hanging over half of his face. It drove my father crazy. And he said, and I want you to cut that hair. And so the semester goes on, and my brother, in fact, got better with the chores, and his grades improved a little bit. And so he came back to my dad and said, okay, so he says, I've done it. And my dad said, okay, well, I see that your grades are a little better. Mom says you're doing your chores a little more consistently. He says, but you haven't cut that hair. And he says, Dad, do you know, in fact, the priest said this in church, that Jesus had really long hair. My dad said, oh, is that so? And did the priest also tell you that Jesus walked everywhere? And that settled it for quite a while. He wanted hair more than he wanted wheels. So today I'm talking about misery to mastery is my topic. That, you know, we have heard, and we certainly teach this, we believe this in the Science of Mind, that it is in fact the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, and that includes everything that would be for our greatest and highest good, for our greatest soul growth, for the greatest development of us in this earthly experience. I believe that what that highest and greatest good is, that good that includes everything, is like pure potential for everything possible that would serve us and our spiritual evolution. Then why do we experience misery? Well, in so many forms we experience misery. You know, because we believe in the Science of Mind that this could be heaven. Right now, our experience of earth could be heavenly, and yet we do not allow it. However, we experience the hell of lack, we experience the hell of separation, the hell of loneliness, the hell of depression, on and on and on and on. Annis Nin said, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Which means, of course, that we all bring something to the seeing. You know, we all bring our history, we bring our current level of belief, we bring our attitude. I believe for a master, to have mastery in our consciousness, I believe that we have to go in the direction that the river is flowing, as opposed to resisting life and constantly saying, it's got to be different than this, it should be something else, this is not right, to just going in the direction that the horse is already running, because we are, in fact, revealing more and more God. You know, for the master, I believe it's not that the master has no problems. It's not that the master experiences no challenges. It's just that as those challenges and problems come, the master is peaceful in how they meet them. The master continues to be love-filled as he meets the difficult conditions. So I wonder, like, well, why are we miserable? And the number one reason, I think, is we look outside of ourselves rather than inside of ourselves for how we're doing. We look outside of ourselves for validation or encouragement or love rather than inside of ourselves, because all of those things already exist within us. But we're so used to looking out here. The barometer for us so often is outside rather than, am I doing what God within me wants me to do? Is my life going in the direction that that presence of the living Spirit is guiding me, is directing me, is pushing me forward? Look, I think that we have been brought up to listen to other people's opinions and hold them more important than our own. And what we do is we compare. How am I doing compared to how they're doing? You know, how am I looking compared to how they're looking? How am I just showing up in life, and how's my experience compared to other people's experience of life? Someone was telling me, someone from the congregation was telling me they had gone on a trip recently. And they said, boy, it was really a group trip. And it was she said, it was very different than traveling with you. And I said, really? What do you mean? And she said, well, you know how you have rules? And I said, yeah. And she said, I'm particularly thinking about don't complain and don't compare. And I said, oh, yes, those. Because, you know, if you ever do group travel with me, those are my rules. Don't complain unless you're complaining to somebody who can do something about it. But just complaining for the sake of complaining poisons the whole trip. Don't come with us. Stay home. That's one. And don't compare. If you want it to be like home, it's not going to be. You should stay here if you want it to be like home, right? But don't go on a trip and want it to be like home. That just doesn't make any sense. And so she said, yeah, there was a lot of complaining on the trip, you know, and that complaining is kind of like a poison that just kind of wafts through and touches other people and influences their experience. You know, when we listen to other people, you know, when we take on their thing, that's giving people outside of us a lot of power, right? You know, to be or not to be based on other people's opinions is not the question, right? That other people will always have an opinion. We know that. It is their job. What is other people's job? To have an opinion. Yes, it is. We know it. But science of mind teaches us that God is everywhere equally present. That the infinite mind, infinite loving intelligence, is everywhere equally present. So this means that there is as much God in you as there is in anyone, as there is in the expert. The difference is the expert believes it and you don't. The difference is the expert perhaps is accessing it, and we sometimes think, well, they know more than me. I know, what do I know? See, why is their opinion better than yours? You are connected to the source as much as anyone else is. Do you believe it or not? Do you cultivate that relationship or not? It says in the scriptures that you shall know the truth and the truth will make you free. Science of mind teaches us again and again that you and I, we dial direct. Remember dialing direct? No operator involved. We dial direct in our relationship to God. That we must be listening to God in us, following that guidance. See, I think as we grow in consciousness, that's what we're doing. We're becoming better and better at listening, at perceiving and listening to that voice of God, that voice of spirit, the inner knower, more and more and more. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, it's easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. Yeah. It is easy in solitude to live after your own. Okay. But the greatest man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of his solitude. You know? That's the thing. The greatest person is the person who in the midst of the crowd keeps what has come to them when they were being still, when they were being quiet and reflective, is how I interpret that. You know, something in us intuitively knows what is right for us. You know, in the Old Testament, Abraham represents the beginning movement in consciousness, the beginning movement in human consciousness into understanding of spiritual law. Because, you know, he was instructed by God, you know, to go from here, right? And if you do as I say, I'm going to take care of you, is God's promise there. And so Abraham is the first to take that voice of God seriously, and he follows its instruction. You know, listening to the opinions of others, you know, for what is right for us is probably going to lead to resentment. Have you ever been in that position where somebody really encouraged you in a particular way, in a particular direction, and you did it because they were so sure and it was not the right thing for you? Many of us have experienced that. And then the natural response is we kind of resent them for their strong encouragement. Why didn't they mind their own business? Well, why did I go to them in the first place? You know, why was I listening to them? Why was I believing that there was more wisdom, more God, more truth in them than there was in me? That is not so. That is just not so. Something intuitively within us always knows. You know? Now, so when people come to me, you know, they'll often say, well, what do you think I should do? What should you do? I say, honestly, I don't know what you should do, but here's what I do know. I know that God is everywhere equally present. I believe that. I know that God is within you, and God within you knows exactly what you need to know and do in this situation if you will turn to it. People don't want to make that effort to turn to it, though. They want to turn everywhere else. I will tell you, I'll tell a little story on myself. Years ago, I was in my pre-Science of Mind days, I was very interested in this trance channel person, being, entity, thing. And, and so I had gone to Arizona on a retreat, a weekend retreat, and this channeler said some things that struck me as very, very unloving. And I was kind of surprised at that. And so people were stirred up by the comments of the channeler, and they were talking about making significant changes in their life based on what this channeler had said. And they asked me, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to resume my life. It's been an interesting retreat, but you know, my guidance is an internal guidance system, not an external guidance system. You know, and so I was good with the channeler right up until they completely disbelieved what I believed. And then I knew, okay, this is wrong for me. This is wrong because it just wasn't a fit for where I was in consciousness and for the path I was beginning to follow. So what's right for us doesn't necessarily have to be what other people think is right. It doesn't have to be what other people are doing. You know, I think going back to the idea of why we're miserable, I think we're miserable because we cannot accept what currently is and because we complain. Really. You know, metaphysical rule number one is don't complain. It really is. It just goes back to the beginning. You know, that complaining is creative in the wrong direction, right? You know, here's what it is. When we complain, we are praying the problem, is what we're doing. Complaining is a problem prayer. So it's like you're telling the universe, this is so good, this is so juicy, I'm getting so much value out of this that I don't like, I'm just going to really put more of it in motion by talking about it to anybody who'll listen, you know, by exaggerating the epicness of how terrible it is. You know, there is nothing to be against, ultimately, because every soul is exactly where they need to be by divine right of consciousness, right? So complaining, remember, is a problem prayer. It sets up what we call a mental equivalent that attracts more of itself, right? This is why misery loves company, right? You know, some people will complain to anyone who will listen to them. Perhaps you know someone like this. Some people encourage it. Hey, had any disasters lately? You know? Are there situations it is okay to complain in? Yes, of course there are. You know, if you complain to someone who can help you do something about it. This is the distinction we make. Complaining just for the sake of complaining is poison. But complaining, like, what can we do about this to make it better, then that's actually, I think, a healthy thing. If I'm going to complain, am I doing it to someone who can do something about it, somebody who can either support me in consciousness to create change, or somebody who can do something about it in the world of effects out here? I think our attitude has absolutely everything to do with our experience, because the law of life is people get what they believe they deserve. Not what they deserve, what they believe they deserve. That's the law of life. You know, we also get what we look for. The universe does not disappoint. So if you look for people to disappoint you, you will be disappointed. But if you look for wonderful, loving people, you will find that the universe is full of loving, wonderful people. Right? So what are we putting out there is always the question we, as students of the science of mind, ask ourselves. You know, another contributor to our misery, I find, is our need to be right. Oh yeah, and I do love to be right, don't you? You know, do we think it makes us less somehow if we're wrong? Okay, so I'm learning still. I'm wrong a lot. I get it. I'm trying to be better, but I know that I'm still in process. You know, it's not hard to be the person who always predicts the worst doom and gloom. It's funny that some people think that that is somehow a gift or a talent. You know, I knew a woman years back, and I was asking her what she thought her gift was, because she seemed very lost in life. And she's told me, honest to God, this is the honest to God truth, she told me that her gift was that she could very easily see other people's faults. And I told her that was not a gift, that was being a bitch. I'm sorry. Forgive me, I'm sorry, but that's what it was, you know. So it's not hard to be the person who always predicts the worst in doom and gloom. And I think it has more to do with what is our commitment to. There was an old Science of Mind slogan that I was very, very fond of. We had this for years, and it was seek the good and praise it. And I always liked that because I felt like that was so life-affirming. It was so encouraging because even in the worst situations, there are things where we could say, okay, what's good here? What's good here? How could this be good? You know, but we come back to that thing about being right. You know, in A Course in Miracles, it says, do you want to be right or want to be happy? My answer always is, if I'm right, I will be happy. But that's not the question. You know, I may not be happy. You know, so often we're not happy, but we think, well, I'm right. Well, good for you, right? But the next step is to ask ourselves, I think, do I want to be right or do I want to be kind? Is this the loving way to be? Is this the compassionate way to be? Because maybe our biggest reason we have misery is that we have a low opinion of ourselves, and that's what the universe reflects back to us. So naturally, we take this out on other people. If you don't feel good about you, you're going to make life hell for other people. And how are we going to do that? We're going to judge, we're going to criticize, we're going to gossip. And very subtly, we see through this lens where other people are somehow less than, or they're inferior, or not enough. But you know, a low opinion of ourselves might include, you know, not just feeling insecure or undeserving or unworthy, or it's low self-esteem, or just plain old-fashioned not good enough. You know, I hear people say so often when things are going well, this is too good to be true. That is not the science of mind. When good happens, we say this is the way of God. Good is the way it's supposed to be. We are opening up to experience more of God's good in our life. And you know, when bad happens, people think, oh, this is the way it's going to be from now on. You know, and it's like, no, no, no. When bad happens, this will pass. This too shall pass. And when good happens, this is what God is intending. See, our goodness is not earned. It's born within us. You know, Voltaire said, love truth, but pardon error. You know, and for ourselves, for other people. Love truth, pardon the error. You know, when was the last time you said to someone, here, live my life for me. Make all of my decisions. You be in charge of everything. I'm just nothing. You just take control of all of it. Please, you know, come on, absolutely not. We are one with God. The power, the presence, the intelligence of the universe. Think of it. The power and presence that created this entire universe actually exists within us. You know, great teachers like Jesus were convinced of the divinity of humankind. And it is our destiny. You know, we create ourselves, we create that destiny to produce a likeness that is within us out here in the world out here. So we're producing an outer life by manifesting an inner life of spirit. You know, we have to remember that there is a point of light in every single person that we see. Every person we see on the street. If you're watching TV and you're watching the news, every single person, regardless of what's happening, we have to remember that there is a point of light within them. There is a spark of God. You know, there is divinity within them. You know, everyone is a child of God, regardless of their behavior. If you make a bad choice or a bad decision or you do something unloving, you don't cease to be God's beloved child in whom he is well pleased. You are God's beloved child in whom he is well pleased, and by the way, you're also still learning, just like all of us are. The difference between us, I think, is the degree in which we recognize this and demonstrate it. But it never ceases to be true of everyone. You know, if you've had a hard time seeing it in yourself, maybe the first step is to start to see the good, the God, in other people. You say, well, you know, some people we're good with, some people it's a little bit harder. If you have a hard time seeing it in other people, then maybe you're somebody who has to start with seeing it in yourself. And you know, so often I find that where people really start to have their spiritual experiences are around nature. You know, that sometimes people have a belief in something greater because they've been at the ocean and they're looking at the ocean, or you're seeing a sunset, or you're holding a baby or a puppy, or whatever, you know, all of these things, I think, put us in touch with being able to see divinity, right? And so it's like, all right, if you can see the divinity in a baby, right? And who cannot see the divinity in a baby? They're just so close to God. So if we can see it in a baby, then it's possible that we could see it in someone a little bigger than a baby. Say someone 45, you know? It's possible. It's there. It exists, right? Because everyone, I believe, is innately good. Everyone is a potential Buddha. Everyone is a potential Christ. Some know it. Some believe it. Others are in the process of waking up to it. So our mistakes have just been a frustration of our divine potential. That's all. We've just frustrated this divine potential that's within all of us. And so it may be that we experience the misery we experience in life because our litmus test is actually we're comparing ourselves to something outside of ourselves. We're comparing ourselves to some standard outside of ourselves. But the fact is, you as a soul, you as an individual soul, incarnated here for your own unique curriculum, not for somebody else's curriculum. Right? You incarnated here because your soul has agreed to this particular journey. Right? So when people say, who do you think you are? Well, the answer is, a child of God. Absolutely. An expression of infinite life and love. I am the activity of the divine mind. And oh, by the way, so are you. You are pure spiritual potential in form. That'll shut them up. Really, it will. Because that is just like way more than people were ready for. Who do you think you are? It's like, who do I think I am? I'm an expression of God. So are you. If we believe that, I believe we are well on our way to being a master. Let's pray. So we turn our attention inward for a moment, recognizing that right here where we are, the fullness, the allness of God's Spirit is. That we are surrounded, we are filled, we are upheld by the very love of God. And so in this awareness, I speak the word for each and every one of us, that wherever we've had a little misery or a lot of misery in our life, I claim for us perfect healing right here, right now. Because with God, all things are possible. And I claim for each and every one of us, we are knowing a greater spiritual truth today, and that greater truth is making us more and more free. So we include in our prayer our family members and friends and loved ones. We know right where they are, God is, and that healing is happening. We speak our word for the world in which we live, for all of those things that grab at our attention. And we say perfect spirit, infinite love, intelligence, peace, right order, all needs met, is in all of those situations. We bless our church, we bless all churches, synagogues and temples, mosques, ashrams, all paths to God. Because on the unseen side of life, we're all connected. There's only one, and we're all it. And so with a full heart, I release this word, saying, thank you, God, and so it is. Together we all say, Amen.